the energy that you bring to any situation is the most important piece. You could be the best father in the world because you were able to make something of it. The energy that you carry in that situation is going to stick with them for life. And they will just remember the energy that you brought to difficult situations, and that will help them in difficult situations down the line.
Get ready to tune into stories of average men striving for greatness, to become the leaders that are needed in their homes, in their career, and their communities. This is the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast.
Hey, what's up, men? Scott Ramage here. Today I have Pearce Cucchissi with me. Pearce has a pretty awesome background, at least I think he does. He was a U.S. Army special operations under the 75th Ranger Regiment. He's done a lot of special ops in the Middle East and other places, I'm sure. And man, he basically, I might have this right, but he's all about human optimization, which I think is incredibly important. I can't wait to talk about some things with you. Welcome to the show, Pearce.
I appreciate it, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
So how bad did I butcher your bio? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
No butchering. You got it pretty much right. So my former career was, U.S. Army Special Operations. I was a Ranger, right? So there's different avenues that people can go within that. There's all different types of units: Rangers, SEALs, Green Berets, MARSOC. The Air Force has them. It's all kind of the same type of guy, similar mission set, just doing, minorly different things. But yeah, deployed all over the Middle East, trained U.S. Special Operations, foreign Special Operations, had a whole good time doing it. Amazing experience. And now, I'm back out in California for the last couple of years and doing all things human optimization from a very holistic view.
That's really cool. How did you get into human optimization? I know you kind of have to, I don't know if you get formal training, like a lot of formal training on that in the service, but what was it that kind of pushed you in that direction?
There's some, but it's really more experiential, right? So I give kind of this journey typically, right? When I first was training for the military and going into what we call selection, right, which is essentially tryouts, it was all about, okay, how do I be physically tough? As physically tough as possible. I need my body to be unbreakable. I need to be able to pass all the tests. I need to be able to not sleep, not eat, and keep going. Then I started to understand, okay, much of this is really mental. How do I become mentally tough? Right. And so started training that, realizing that, okay, maybe this is even more important than the physical. Then I started gaining some awareness around all the other guys around me that were failing or quitting, and seeing how they're talking to themselves, what their mindset is like, what they're doing with their bodies that's causing this quitting and failure. And then as I went operational and I started to see guys that they made it, they're extremely physically fit, they're tough, their minds are strong, but they've been there for years. And why are they now having issues? It's performance issues, mental issues, issues at home, issues with drugs and alcohol, behavior, whatever it was. And I'm recognizing now that you have to be also emotionally tough. And then afterwards, after the military experience, I'm coming back into civilian life and seeing kind of the stress, or what we call operator syndrome, which is essentially a cumulative effect of allostatic load, which just means stress and perceived stress on the mind and body, and how that affects people's lives. And it was not only myself, it was athletes, it was people in business, everybody that I see. And then I started to gain this awareness of, okay, it's not toughness, it's resilience. Resilience being the ability to bounce back from anything, right? You think of resilience, to me, is really the ultimate measure of toughness. I think about like a rock or a diamond, right? They're incredibly strong, but under a certain amount of pressure, they will eventually break. If you take a lacrosse ball, you can throw that thing as hard as you can at any surface and it will bounce right back into the same shape that it was, right? And so even though it's softer, it's more resilient. And so I just kind of became obsessed and fascinated with this whole world, mostly from, it's been a passion of mine for a long time. And it's been able to help a lot of other people too.
Yeah. Wow. like you hit the nail on the head. Like seriously, what's really going on in my mind about the way men in particular, because that's, my market, my interest is on men, but the way that they're handling situations, and we had a little conversation about this before, but I want to dive right into that. But first,
Yeah.
you said some term, and I can't remember what it was. I don't have my pen and paper, but you said some term. It was like a golly.
Operator
Well,
syndrome.
it was after that. We'll get back to it.
Allostatic load.
Yeah, allostatic load. I've never heard that before, which is quite surprising because I hear. So explain allostatic load a little more.
Yeah, so you can actually, if you go online and you look up operator syndrome, it's now a medical term and there's studies and everything. And it came from the military. They're saying military operators. They're taking a look at all these guys and saying, okay, they don't have PTSD like people had back in World War II, where they got drafted, they didn't want to be there. Like all these guys knew what they were getting into. They wanted to do everything that they did. So, okay, why are there so many issues? Now, once again, I believe this operator syndrome to a degree is applicable to all men, especially hard driving men that were maybe athletes, they're in business. Allostatic load is essentially a cumulative amount of stressors, which means physical stress, like how much you've been beating on your body, how much you haven't been sleeping, poor nutrition, whatever. Mental stress, if you've been running at red line for years and years and years, or you're in a stressful environment, or your brain chemistry gets too accustomed to adrenaline, epinephrine, hormones like that, concussions. And then we have perceived stress, which creates a true physical reaction, which is, for some people, being in combat might be the most stressful thing in their lives. And for some people, it might be fear of failure, right? That's actually creating that stress. So it's essentially just this funnel of all of these stressors that are going into the human system, which is mind and body. So it's covering a wide range of things, and essentially everybody fits into this category. So my goal has really been, how do we fix operator syndrome, not just for military operators, not just for firefighters and law enforcement, but for entrepreneurs, executives, athletes, moms, anybody.
Well, it's real. I mean, as you were talking about it from like the operator standpoint, you think, okay, that stress is real. I mean, there's stress of making sure you're getting things right. You know, handling the equipment, keeping yourself safe, being on a pivot at all the time, the emotional stress, the physical stress, all those things. So how does that, have you seen like the same level of intensity in that with entrepreneurs and high achievers? I mean, does it get to the
Yes.
same level?
To a degree. So a lot of times physically, maybe not the same. There may not be as big adrenaline dumps. Entrepreneurs, executives might have a little bit better physical environments, but mentally, you have to think of stress. It's all perspective based. So somebody that's been in combat for years in the Middle East, those things become normal, and they maybe bring them up to a level 7 or 6 of stress, right? But that consistently, chronically becomes the issue. An entrepreneur may get brought to a level 6 or 7 from anything, just running their business, running their family, whatever that is. But that 6 or 7 maintained over years, that's what's creating these issues, because our body will adapt, right? It adapts to anything. It's really good at it. So if we are living at a level 7 stress level for years, our body will create that as a new baseline. If we are stressed out, we know, by, you can go do this in a workout, you start getting all these negative thoughts in your head and all these fears. It's your body's way of trying to protect you. So now imagine people's normal way that they're living is with a pre-programmed negative mind state because of this stress. So the goal is reset everybody back to zero. be able to handle stress at a level of 10 and then quickly drop yourself back down and maintain that 0, 1, 2 as your baseline, right? The ability to turn it on when we want and turn it off. That's where the keys to performance lie.
That's really cool. I mean, just today I came into this call and I told you it'd been a ton of stuff coming across me through text and message, and it's just been, it was like I was under fire. It's like bam, 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 just fires to put out, things to do, and I'm coming in like really hot. And I've implemented a lot of breathing practices, and usually there's a reset I can do. Like, it's like step into this reset, but it's taken so long to get to a place where I even remember to do a reset. Where it becomes like ritual, like, whoa, I'm getting to this point. I need to stop. I need to do some breathing. I need to maybe do some gratitude, like what things are going right. Kind of like that gap I don't know if you read The Gap in the Gain, where you can focus on the gain that you've had rather than the gap. There's all these tools to help, but I don't know that you can ever fully be dialed in there. It's like a never-ending journey.
It is, and you can't, right? That's the whole point of this, right? Most people are like, oh, can I fix it in a day? No, it's just like physical training, right? We live this life that is constantly putting negative effects on our bodies. We may be sitting all the time. There's fumes out there. There's, crap in the food and the water and the air, negative energy from people, whatever it is, right? It's constant. So we have to constantly be training our bodies to go the opposite way towards health. So we have to do the exact same thing with the mind. And you're only going to get better at it, which is you're going to have this process of remembering, and you're going to remember closer and closer to the event that actually happened that stressed you out. However, you'll never get perfect, and that's okay. We have to be okay with it, right? This will be a lifelong process in the school of earth, right? We will constantly be trying to offset negative physical health effects and negative mental health effects, and there will always be a deeper level and deeper degrees that we can go in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that sometimes for myself, I can feel like, wow, I didn't handle that the way I should have. Like, what did I do wrong? It's just literally a constant evolution. And for me to even acknowledge or see post event that I could have stopped and done a little self-regulation, and brought things back into perspective. So I think, we obviously have to have some grace on ourselves. One thing I've noticed a lot of, and I don't know how long this thing has been going, and I've been a part of it, is this: we live in a pretty soft world at least in our culture and in North America. We have AC, we have heat, we have cars to get us places. We sit a lot for work, and then we get sit-stand desks. So we're kind of like in this pseudo mobile process all the time. So a lot of people are manufacturing hard things, and I've noticed like a real upswing in that for the last few years of ice baths, which do have some physiological benefits for sure, sauna, but talking about like extremes, like doing these extremes and how it's developing their mind. I like to go on long rucks and, continue to add weight and see what I can do. But what I've noticed, and maybe you can disagree with me on this or agree, is that there's a lot of guys, I'm going to use guys because that's what I know. There's a lot of guys who are doing this, and they're all about building their resilience, and they're all about being tough. And they talk about mental fortitude or mental strength. But man, when the rubber meets the road, they're pretty soft. I've just noticed that they're caving to challenges that are outside of that comfort zone. They've now become physically comfortable with discomfort. Am I onto something here, or what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. How do you see that manifest mostly
For other people?
The guy that's doing the ice bath, he's doing the hard long rucks, and then where do you typically see them cave?
Almost everywhere outside of that element, right? Like, and another place, well, they figured out how to respond in their work environment. So their work environment, they're dialed. They're like, okay, I'm going to do box breathing. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get me. And I have this thing in place. So they've actually worked on this mental response, this physiological mental response. In the physical, some of them have dialed it into work, but it's family situations, like how they respond to their family, real quick to anger and not really thinking logically, and um, not seeing their actions directly correlated to the outcomes. My wife's pissed at me and she doesn't appreciate me. Well, you're not doing the hard things with your family, and so there's like this disconnect. Or I'll use myself. I'll throw myself on the fire. I used to just absolutely go crazy when something went wrong with travel. I'm traveling, I get to the airport, my plane is, backed up, or they didn't tell me they moved my seat, and it would like completely hijack me. I was in amygdala hijack. I was just like, I couldn't think, everything was out the window. And that's something I had to work with, but I'm noticing this with other men. Like, if something's out of how they see it going, like, how is this going to go? And it deviates, they just crumble. They give up. I'm seeing guys give up on what I see as easy situations where they could go for a 12-hour ruck. No problem.
Yeah.
I'll go for a 12-hour ruck. I think almost they know how to handle that. They know what their controllables and non-controllables on there are in that situation, right? And
Yeah.
they've worked to that point. But it's when these little things, like your wife isn't attending to you the way that you think she is, or she's not affectionate with you at that moment. It's like we go into this little baby tizzy.
Yeah.
We have these responses that are like, man up, dude.
There's totally two sides to this coin, right? And one thing to recognize is that suffering is essentially unrealized expectations. Right? So we
Yes.
go into the ruck and we understand what the expectation is, and we know we can meet those expectations. But we set unrealistic expectations within life. The first thing that I see the issue with is compartmentalization of emotion. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this isn't an issue in an acute sense, it's an issue in a chronic sense. So you're at work, something comes up, and you have the ability to maintain cool, calm, collective sense of self. Amazing. It's no different than what we train in the military. I walk down a hallway, my buddy gets shot, he's on his own. I'm leaving him there because I have to finish the fight in order to create safety for the situation. Right? So this is where most men, they start to train, they get really good at it. They don't do the opposite side, which is how do I completely reset and process any emotion that comes up? So if you have issues with expectation for travel, right, there's a feeling inside that either something let you down, someone let you down. There's a fear of failure. There's a fear
Mm-hmm.
of a lack of time. I'm not speaking for you, but these are just some ideas that could come up. We have these different expectations on the compartmentalization side, or when you talk about, coming home and being quick with the kids, or the wife, a lot of times it's bringing this energy, right? When we compartmentalize emotion at work so that we can stay on the straight and narrow, we're blocking what's really underneath. And then when we don't have that task to narrow in on, all of those subconscious thoughts and emotions come up. So what I teach people to do is actually, how do we process these emotions and manage our state preemptively before we go into a situation? So you had a rough day at work, or maybe not even rough, but you were lasered in and focused. Whatever your reset is, do your reset. Change your energy. Visualize the situation in the correct way. Slow down. Maybe this is when you pull your car into your garage and you take 2 minutes to do this before you step into the house. This was a huge issue for me, right? I came back, I was in a military setting. I'm go, go, go all the time. And I was on that same path when I was working, and your mental state completely changes. And the wife walks in and she's not getting the energy from me, that's needed for the relationship. And, it was because of my own issues and my own state. So really learning this state control is incredibly important, and how we reset baseline. The next part, where we go even deeper, is to understand, okay, what is the unconscious programming that lives in our brains? Sit down after everybody goes to bed and say, okay, why did I react? Now ask why again. Really why? Really, really why? Get to the actual issue and solve it there. And so this is kind of this process that I think is so important for people. And unfortunately, typically it takes some sort of breaking point, right? Where you get some big issue with yourself or your business, or your family, to be like, okay, now I need to rework some things.
Yeah, that's good. There's so many little things that I've personally done in my life to like, especially transition. Talked about like getting home and making that transition. Uh, like I used to drive, worked corporate, drive home, and and also this is what guys say all the time. In fact, a guy in the group just posted like, I have to work all day. I get up early. I go to work. I drive home, and then I walk in and I have no me time. And I s- I personally I don't respond to people like that. I let other guys because I'm like pissed. Like, what do you mean me time? You just had an hour drive from work. Like, what were you doing with your brain? Like in my brain, I'm like, you know, it's so simple. You
Mhm.
just you transition and you go in, and your wife, if you have little kids, has not had a millisecond of me time. So it's like, it's resetting your expectations of what your day is going to look like now that you are a father and a husband. But do you see a lot of men just not making that transition well?
Oh,
Personally,
absolutely. I would say
yeah,
the majority of us do not. Some do. Before your guy with the example, right? There is an obvious issue there. When we would look to optimize what he's doing, we could say, okay, me time is within. There's nothing outside of us that is going to give us the feeling that we want. It's all created from within. Typically, if he's saying me time, that's time to numb out, right? What
right.
does that mean for people? This could mean doing something healthy, like working out. This could mean playing video games, sitting on the couch, whatever it is. Time where we can block out and numb out the stress of our day, right? He's already saying, I'm working all day, right? And I come home and I just want some me time. Okay, well, you have issues at work. You're either not fulfilled with your position, you're not handling work correctly, your relationships at work aren't well, you don't feel fulfilled and purposeful and motivated. There's one issue. And then maybe there's an issue at home as well, right? Where you're seeking something else that isn't there instead of creating it, right? And
Hmm.
if we understand that we can create our own internal environment, that gives us incredible responsibility. And I'll put it like this: if you thought about something that made you really, really angry, you would start to actually feel anger,
Hmm.
right? You would start to get hot. Your heart rate might increase. Now, if you did the opposite, and you thought about the best situation possible, or you're on a beach somewhere with your wife and there's no worries, people start to get that. They feel the relaxation within. Okay. So now that we know that we can control our internal environment with our mind and body, right? Breath, thinking, awareness. So with that comes incredible responsibility, especially as men in this case, right? This guy he's obviously out, his wife's at home, so he's kind of, controlling the household, he's out making the money, and then he comes home and he has to give this fatherly energy to the family. He gets to control that, he gets to choose. So this is kind of a long-winded way of saying we need to look at everything that is going on. If there's an issue on the front end that's causing a reaction, we work on fixing that. If there's an issue on the back end, right, with family life, we work on fixing that. All the while, we're teaching this internal self-regulation so that the goal is to be able to be in this state of peace, even in the most chaotic environments.
So a lot of it's just acknowledging and understanding, like not just acknowledging that you're in it, but making connections to what led to it, what kind of like how you respond. I've had to work a lot at, like, if I'm angry or I have an expectation, the expectation's the biggest one. And I love what you said about expectations, especially with my wife. Like I have an expectation of we're going to go do a date night or whatever it is. And that expectation is stopped. Like she's like, no, I can't, I have this, or there's some other thing. There's there's like an immediate response in me that goes straight to frustration. And I think a lot of men, like you can confirm this, but I think a lot have an anger response. Like there's a real quick anger response when things aren't working or things feel out of control. Um, but are you saying that there's a lot of other pieces that are playing into that, not and we just really need to get to the underlying what's going on? What are all the things that are contributing to this?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, right? The band-aid solution is just to be able to reset yourself, have a good frame of mind, and say, okay, move on.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece of this is what you mentioned, which is anger. Anger is typically a higher energetic, vibrational, emotional environment that can overcome fear and sadness, right? And we've been told as men that sadness and fear not the right way to live. So we learn to overcome it with anger. One of the biggest questions you can ask yourself when you get frustrated, angry, is what are you sad or afraid of? Now, fear is completely okay to acknowledge that we have it. It's hardwired into our brains. You walk to the edge of a cliff, your brain says, ooh, step back, right? It's completely natural. We have to use the emotions as data, right? And not, oh, I'm just this, scared guy. Okay. So you mentioned control, right? Like, why do we have a fear of being out of control? Does it make you feel unsafe in a way? If that's the case, then we look at control and we go down this kind of philosophical path of, do you actually even have control of anything? Is it important to have control? Is the ultimate measure of resilience being able to completely give up control and navigate life just as it's presented to you? Does any of that resonate?
Oh hell yeah! I when I read "The Obstacle Is the Way," there was a lot of connections that were made for me, and that's kind of just your basic, Stoic philosophy. But this is like, hey, there's things outside of your control, but some connections were made in my head, and so but I never put the connection of that being out of control. And so for me, this is really good. I hope it's helping other men because what I had done in response, the travel one is a big deal for me. It used to really get me. So, and I've told this story multiple times, taking my wife to Costa Rica, or no, I'd taken my family on spring break 2 years ago. And I knew because it's spring break and we were flying a long way, I knew there were going to be flight problems. I just knew it. And I found myself like, having anxiety and not even wanting to do the trip because I'm like, I don't want my family to be hanging out in the airport for 2 days, or us get back late and we have to find more care for our dog or whatever. Just all the stupid stories we tell in our head. So I then took that and practiced those scenarios in my head. All right, if a flight is canceled, how am I going to respond? I literally played those out in my head and played out all the different scenarios. And it worked because we had a situation on the way home there. We're not going to be able to get you home for 2 days. I was like, okay, here we go. Family, go stand over here. And I was incredibly calm. And I was able to play out the logical, correct way to work with somebody,
Yeah.
And just be super agreeable and happy and cheerful and say the person's name over and over again and like played it out. And within 5 minutes, I had my flight booked for an hour later. Like it's like magically everything was fixed, right?
Amazing.
But normally I would have flipped out and screamed. Normally, being years ago, would have flipped out, screamed, "This is full. This is stupid." I've been frantically trying to find other flights and paying extra money or whatever it was. And but so I've been able to adapt a lot of that in almost every scenario in my life. I try, if something's going to be stressful, I try to pre-plan different things. So I think there's a real importance to that. I think there's a huge importance to that. It's like the mental prep. It's we're so into this physical prep. I go into that mental prep. But the big question that now you have me questioning is like, what about those things? What is it actual fear?
Yeah.
going on. And so now my brain is like switching to the deeper level that I think really men need to get to. I think they need to have mental prep for situations, but I have a good friend who talks about creating space and the importance of, for him, meditation, and also like uh, when he gets into that spot where he's experiencing feelings of anger or frustration or shortness of um, he's just not being good with his family, stopping and really evaluating, really connecting to the feelings, and almost doing like a reverse ladder from, okay, this happened and this happened, this is how I feel, and this, and I think that just takes an incredible amount of practice and skill.
Yeah.
So how do you connect to what really is the situation? Like for me, like what really is causing such anxiety around things not going the way I planned in the flight?
Awesome. Well, you did the first thing correctly, which is what I call performance oriented thinking. You recognized a response, an emotional response in the body that's creating a negative thinking pattern, and you changed it to a positive, right? It's the same thing every time you go and jump out of a plane. We're always going to get the same thoughts. What if I land and break my leg and blah, 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 right? What if I hit somebody in the air? Like, of course, you're jumping out of a plane. It's not natural, right? So we go straight into executing the task in the perfect way over and over again until you actually do it. Okay. That is a great skill for everybody to learn. And that takes discipline in itself to recognize and take a third person point of view of, ooh, I'm feeling that feeling again. Okay. Let's switch our frame. Now, the deeper level of this, the thing that stuck with me that you said is, don't want to have my family stuck in an airport. That makes me think initially there's a fear or a sadness around failure of being a father, a good father.
Oh, that's good, man.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Oh
And then
yeah, that's huge.
if we asked, the next question would be, why do you feel like that bothers you?
Hmm.
Why does this having a family sit at the airport make you feel like a failure as a father? So
And
do
I
you
actually
know?
know that. I actually know the answer to that, and I'm actively working through it. It's the whole birth of brotherhood of fatherhood. There was another element with my business partner, the other guy I'm working on this with, but my element is my complete what I view as a failure as a father when my boys were really young. Like, because I completely worked everything. Work was everything. I completely neglected my family. And my wife and I started to do this thing where we're just living life parallel, instead of living
Yeah.
life together on the same track. And my wife, even like last week, she's like, Scott, you did not fail as a father. You did not fail as a husband. You learned, but I still have incredible connections to that fear of not
Okay.
not stepping up. And I think this is big for a lot of men. Maybe they haven't failed yet, or they don't know if they have, but their dad did. Like, there's just
Yeah.
so many layers to this, but for me it's very clear. I mean, it's incredibly clear. I mean, you just connected a couple more dots, which was
Yeah.
awesome.
And it makes
Yeah.
sense, right? You've got this thing that happened in the past that created a fear for the future, and it's giving this response.
Yeah.
Right. So what can we do? Okay, we analyze that the true fear, the true sadness is that we're going to be a failure as a father.
Hmm.
Now we get to say, okay, could you possibly be a failure as a father if you brought the proper energy to every situation? Think about humans. Our first language for you and me was not English, it was energy.
Hmm.
We could recognize when, even as infants, when somebody was happy, excited, or angry, right? We can feel that, right? We're essentially like these electromagnetic energy inside of a human flesh body, and we can feel these things. So the energy that you bring to any situation is the most important piece. You could be the best father in the world, even if your kids were stuck in an airport for 24 hours with no food, because you were able to make something of it. The energy that you carry in that situation is going to stick with them for life. They will
Right.
eventually forget about the time that they got stuck in the airport going to Costa Rica. and they will just remember the energy that you brought to difficult situations, and that will help them in difficult situations down the line. So now we switch the frame of thinking to, it does not matter what happens on the external, it only matters what your state is and what energy that you are passing on to other people, because that's the only thing that's real. Right? The expectation was that we have this trip. Great. It was just something that we planned and hoped to happen.
Yeah. Well, there's so much here. It's really good. And something that I've done that I think has been really healing and healthy is I've given myself the permission to, when I do fail in those situations, or I feel like I failed, or I overreact, or whatever the case, I have made it practice to talk to my boys and my wife directly. Hey guys, yesterday at the movie theater when X happened, I really regret the way I responded. Here's what I learned from it. There's a lot of freedom in talking that stuff out, because my motivation is to raise the most amazing men. Like they treat others with kindness and respect, and they serve their communities. And for me, I think this is part of my self-healing, is that when I fail, instead of looking at it as a failure, I can look at it as a way to use what happened in that circumstance to help my boys not do the same thing. So I don't know if that's a coping mechanism or what, but it's been really freeing for me.
No, it's a really good way, and you're also teaching them ways to process a lot of these emotions, right? The key here is processing. We unlearn processing of emotion, and then unlearn it gets trapped in the body, right? If you look at you can watch videos of this. A gazelle gets chased by a lion, fears for its life, massive stress response, and then they shake. If they survive, they shake. And it's a nervous system processing the emotional stress of what just happened. That same gazelle, right after the shaking, is able to go right back to the watering hole where it got chased by a lion. Right? So it can regulate its nervous system very easily, because they're not overthinking it. They don't have societal pressures or whatever they learned, right? They're a little bit more simple. We unlearn how to do that. Kids do that, right? A kid is all happy. All of a sudden, his toy gets taken away. They freak out for 5 minutes, and then they return and they can be smiling again, right? Mm-hmm. They're processing the emotion. If we do not have a way of processing the emotion, you can think of it as getting stored inside of the body. If it is stored for too long, it starts influencing the way that we think and feel, which then has a negative snowball effect on all of our reactions. So what you're doing with your family of showing vulnerability, acknowledging it, actually thinking through the situation, is a way of processing and releasing emotions. And it has the secondary positive effect of teaching your boys. So it's really awesome you're doing that.
I'll just keep doing it. I tell other men to do it. I'm like, teach through your failures, man. Just teach. You're gonna screw up all the time. Like, just, you may as well use it for something good, right? And we always say you don't fail unless you don't learn. So, and that's in life, that's in parenting, that's in marriage, that's in work. But another technique that I've used and talked to men about using, and maybe you can help me decipher whether this is a good one or not. And I've found it beneficial. But before I step out of my office for the last time, because I work from home, or I literally say out loud, how can I best serve my family this evening? And what it does for me is it actually switches my brain. I feel like I've developed it or created this situation where it switches my brain from work thought to family thought. I've heard men that get out of their vehicle and there's a tree on the way to the house as they're walking in, and they hit the tree. They're leaving everything at the tree, like these like totems, or these things that are like a physical. And I know someone else who does like hand motions. So like, okay, I'm pushing it all behind me for the day, and I'm going in, and I'm gonna be with my family. How does that fit into all this? Is this something you've seen as successful, or is it just Jedi mind tricks I played with myself.
No, I think it all has a benefit, but I do believe that you can optimize what you're doing there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're getting this kind of philosophical mind state where we're saying, okay, how can I best serve my family? Let me go do that. To go a level deeper, you have to physically leave everything,
That's
right?
cool.
Hitting the tree is great. Saying how you're going to change the way that when you enter your home is great. The next step is actually releasing any pent up negative energy that's going to affect the way that you think, act, and behave. So if you had a day at work where you felt like you were running at 1,000 miles per hour, even if you think about how can I best serve my family, your body, your nervous system will be in a stimulated state. That is going to, as a byproduct of that, emphasize whatever your typical reaction is, which could be being snappy with your kids and your wife if you get frustrated. So you can utilize things such as the breath, such as meditation, such as movement, walking, a little bit of exercise to physically change the nervous system state in your body. So if you pulled your nervous system out of your body, it would look like a human, right? It's all nerves everywhere. This is the biggest control of what we do. So my next suggestion to this is change your physical state, then give those thoughts and maybe a visualization of how you want to act when you get home. And then you will be primed and in the best position to actually execute the way that you wanted to. But we have to return to baseline.
Shake like the gazelle. Like
Exactly.
seriously.
And there are practices just like that. You can think of, like people say, ecstatic dance is incredibly healing, right? There are literally meditative practices where you shake, where you breathe quickly, where you do things like that, where you process. Think about physical exercise. Feels mentally relaxing. You are moving energy, you're processing energy. So having some sort of way, we have to really treat the body and mind. We only have these two different words so that we can understand differences, but it's one thing. We are one system, right? We don't necessarily know where consciousness and mind actually lives. It's one human. So when I say we have to relax the body so that we can influence the mind and thus our thoughts, actions, and behaviors, it's really one thing. So come up with whatever works for you. Like I said, I recommend movement. I recommend some sort of breath. I recommend some sort of meditation. And then you're in this perfect state. And then you visualize just like you did when you were at the airport. And then you execute.
Yeah, I think I do almost regularly do box breathing just because it's super easy. The 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. It's super easy. I'm teaching my boys that anytime you go through a transition, like you're transitioning into a new class, maybe you need to just stop and breathe, or you're going into my oldest just went into an interview. He's like, man, it totally changed. Like I was stressed and then I just went in. It was like, I was clear. So I think I've done some of that, but I do have a friend that does the shake thing. Like, and I thought she was crazy. She's like, when I'm done with work, I literally shake. And I was like, where in the world did you get that? And she's kind of always kind of been, just doing, she's not shy. She just does whatever. And she tells everybody about it, but it makes sense now. And I've seen those videos where the antelope will shake it. It's almost like a dog shaking, they get up and they shake off and then they move on. It's kind of the same type of activity. But it's almost something men should do, like either before they get in their car on their way home from work, or like once they get home, that, like you said it at the beginning, like take a few minutes in your car before you transition into the house or whatever it is. These are super, super applicable and super helpful for sure.
Of course, it's just having this transitional routine so that we always remember, no matter what happens on the outside, we have the ability to control our internal state. Yeah. What I'm going to tell you now is you will fail. I still fail.
Oh yeah.
We'll continue to fail. There will always be a level of optimization we can make. And so this is training. This is how we train as men or as people to be the best versions of ourselves. And we won't always get it right. And then we have another thing to practice, which is release of judgment of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of constant, but it really does lead to a more improved life for ourselves and families.
That's awesome. Awesome. So before we wrap up, I mean, this is what you do. You help high performers. I think on your resume, you've got like you got NFL athletes, executives, entrepreneurs, financial institution. You say financial, yeah,
Yeah,
and
we've got
healthcare
everybody
CEOs,
from, yeah, private
all high
equity,
performers.
investment bank, entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
professional athletes. And to be honest, it doesn't matter what you're doing. These are human issues and processes. It's not directly specific to whatever, your profession is.
So I do want to make a connection though, because you do work with those people. I want to make a connection for people because we have a lot of times we hold these like professional athletes up to the limelight, or we hold these people that have done so well succeed with success, and we take what they say with so much like, wow, that person said X. You think of Will Smith or well, maybe not recently, but you think of these people, we all make mistakes, but we think of these people and are like, man, they're so intelligent in all areas. And the point that I would make is they were really good in probably one area, but they understood the importance of coaching, mentoring, and improving themselves in all the other areas. And they put the resources into it. And I think that's a really good connection for an average person to see, is like the differentiation between them and you. At this point, not all of them are famous people are like this, but at this point is they probably put a lot of work into things like you're talking about, and they spent time, money, and effort into it.
Of course. And, typically for a lot of those people or famous people, they have the resources and the time to do so.
Right.
But it does create that effect. I think the coaching, mentoring is the biggest way that we can gain anything, the biggest way that we can make any sort of change. Right. And it doesn't, and you can get different things from different mentors and different coaches. And I will continue to seek that for the rest of my life. Right. Because there are people that have experiences that I don't have, and they have good insights. And the other piece is that they don't have the emotional attachment to what's going on in my life as I do.
Right.
And that is essentially they are the built-in third person observer that we are trying to build within ourselves. So it becomes an incredibly huge ROI process.
Oh, I like how you said that. Yeah. And the ROI is insane. I personally will attest to that. When my businesses started to grow and I started to make progress in being a better dad, being a better father, being a better business owner, being a better human, having better physical fitness and mental fitness, all of those pivoted around coaches that I paid for, and the ROI has been phenomenal. So I definitely would back that up 100%. So we're going to drop all your details in the show notes. For the lazy guy that doesn't want to go there, is where do they find you? They find you on Facebook, they find you on Instagram, LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm on most of the social platforms. People can find me on Instagram. You can also just go to my website, operationevolve.net.
Ooh, I like that.
Shoot me a message. I'm happy to chat with anybody.
That's awesome. Pearce, anything else before we close this thing up, man?
No, I just appreciate you having me on, and I'm really looking forward to hearing how some of your experiences go that you're doing in person with people. I think that's the most effective way.
Oh yeah, can't wait to do the in-person things. And quite honestly, I'd love to have you at one. I think it would be phenomenal to like talk this stuff through with a bunch of guys and let them realize some of those things that might be hijacking their lives because they're not responding. Yeah. So I feel like I got a little mini coaching session. So I'm coming away with this with all sorts of energy. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your time and breathing some life into me and probably some of the listeners too. So thanks again, brother.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends, your family, and follow us on social media. If you are a father, make sure you join our Facebook group, The Brotherhood of Fatherhood. Hit the subscribe button and tune in next time for more podcasts from the Brotherhood of Fatherhood.